All right. What the heck, dude? Let's look at this here. This here. You can see everything. You can see it. All right, here we are, first ever Pure Potential live. It's a little bit different way of getting my content. Hopefully everything's working. I've just started using OBS and getting that set up, so hopefully I sound okay. Hopefully I look okay. It's definitely a work in progress, but we're here. I see T-Hum in the chat. Welcome to the stream. This is a momentous occasion. I'm sure this will be in the history books, but yeah, you know, hoping I can offer some value with these streams. Eventually, ideally, more people in the chat, more people asking questions, make this more of an interactive thing. But I have some stuff that I can get through today. Some transactions. I don't know if any of you listening now or potentially listening in the future are familiar with JJ Zacharyason's weekly transactions that he does during the season, but I find that to be a helpful way to think about trade opportunities and ads and drops. So probably make that a fixture. Just run through whatever transactions I'm thinking about during the week, and from there we can jump into the rankings stuff. Won't always be about rankings, but with the rankings being so new and with so much news going on, they do need updating. So I'm going to go through some of the changes that I've made, and then see if there's anything else worth tinkering with, any notes I can take about changes to make. One thing about me as an analyst I'm very upfront about is I don't have all the answers, and there are often things that I feel like I don't know, like players where I'm kind of at a loss as to how to treat them, and I try to split the difference. I try to be make educated guesses, but I don't pretend to know everything all the time. So if there's a player where I'm like, I'm just not sure if this player is ranked correctly, I'll just come out and say it. For now, though, we'll talk about some preseason transactions. Like I said, just things on my mind. One thing, just right off the bat, a player to potentially be sending out offers for, looking into at least, is Tank Dell. I've already said that I love Tank Dell. I'm sure that I've talked about him in the chat at some point. Really good rookie season in a limited sample of games. We know he's in a great situation, at least in terms of the quarterback. And the questionable part is, what is his role right now? Some of the snap count stuff from preseason hasn't been terribly good for him. I mean, it hasn't been bad. He caught a touchdown and everything, but he's the one who's getting the short end of the stick right now in 11 personnel. And so I think it's possible some people would be concerned. Like if if the perception is he is the clear wide receiver 3 in this offense, and therefore his upside is capped, he's going to lose value. I'm not worried about that. So I think I'm just comfortable betting on a player that I believe is really good, who is young, who is tied to a young league quarterback. There are just so many outs for him where he has contingent upside, first of all. If Nico or Diggs misses time, he's got wide receiver 1 upside. But the Texans could also just run a ridiculous amount of 11 personnel. Like if they're, we can't take this guy off the field, we need all the wide receivers on the field, problem solved. Stephon Diggs could hit the age cliff. We don't know for sure what version of Stephon Diggs we're getting. Even if he starts the season well, he has faded down the stretch the last 2 years. Could happen again this year. And then, he could just be super efficient on a per-out basis, and maybe he doesn't give you high-end wide receiver 1 production, but you could get kind of a Brandon Ayuk type of season where Ayuk was running all the routes, but he was running all the routes, but he was also in a very low-volume passing offense, where you could have Dell in kind of a part-time or most of the time role in a higher passing volume offense with a lot of efficiency. So I think there's a lot of ways for it to pay off for him. I'm not sending out first. I'm not actively sending first-round picks, but anything equivalent to like a late 1, I think is still a great price to pay for Tank Dell. I still prefer him over JSN, prefer him over Jordan Addison, Jaden Reed, those other year 2 guys. I think between him and Zay Flowers, it's super close. I think with him and Rashee Rice, super close. I'd probably lean Rice. But yeah, I think he's very gettable in a lot of leagues. I drafted him in the Pure Potential startup that we did. I liked the price on him there. So that's one guy you could maybe send out offers for. And then otherwise, just the boring players, just like I bought Justin Herbert, right? And I made a video about that. Justin Herbert's not getting buzz, right? He had the foot injury. He hasn't really been doing a lot, not making splash plays. He's not a new player. There's not a ton to be excited about with the Chargers, and so, it's like, what have you done for me lately? You can soak up those boring players. If you can find the managers in your league that are fixated on the next big thing, the next big rookie, I think the edge is not in chasing the risers right now. It's going out and getting the guys that are undervalued. So, I don't know, whether it be DK Metcalf or George Kittle or whoever, it's not a specific player necessarily. It's just the guys that we know are good that are maybe a little under the radar right now because they're just not the center of attention. Anybody that is currently watching, if you could drop a message in the chat at some point, just so that I can make sure you can hear me and that everything's coming through all right, that would just be peace of mind for me, just to know that you're engaged. But the next transaction here would be a sell, and this is a soft sell. This isn't like the sky is falling. This is an emergency situation, but I'm seeing a lot of buzz on Jalen McMillan, and I'm just kind of curious what is out there on the market for him. I don't have a lot of Jalen McMillan on my teams, and so I can't really test this out too much myself. I guess I could go and look up the trades that are going down right now, but it just crossed my mind about McMillan, where people are getting excited about him. Like, I know his best ball ADP has been steadily on the rise. He was a last round pick, and then he's 17th, and then 16th, and then 15th. He's really moving up, and he has an interesting profile. Voice a little crackly. Okay, that's good feedback. Maybe my mic's too high. Let me try to bring the mic down a little bit. Maybe that'll help bring it away from my face. Maybe let me know if that sounds a little bit better. But Jalen McMillan, good profile, but in college almost entirely slot player. I think the highest slot rate in the whole class. And he's obviously behind Evans and Godwin. Evans getting up there in age, so potentially could take on a larger role at some point, but you've also got Baker Mayfield there on a long-term deal. I'm not excited about the Buccaneers offense long-term. So this is just, a guy, if he's going to get a lot of hype as a rookie, I just wonder, can you get a second and a third for him? And I made a similar trade last year to send away Tank Dell early in the season, and I regretted it. But I feel like more often than not, when you have these like late day 2, day 3 type wide receivers, limited skill set or seemingly limited skill sets on crowded depth charts, when they get buzz, it just feels like more often than not, cashing out for a profit works out. So, it's not a must sell. You could hold him and wait and see, but I do think in most scenarios, if you can get a second and a third for Jalen McMillan, like massively profit on where you were taking him in drafts, that's probably going to be a profitable choice, right? Like, what is the path for him to really become an every week starter for you? Anything more than like a 10 points per game player this year, you need an injury to one of the other wide receivers. You need him to be capable of filling in. You need the Buccaneers offense to be solid. I just feel like there's a lot that would have to happen for you to really miss out on him. So that's just a thought. As far as a hold, I don't really believe in holds in like the traditional sense. I just think the idea of a hold is usually flawed because there's a price for every player. So that there should never be blanket advice like you have to hold a player. So if you get an offer that's well above market, you should sell that player. But I think it can apply at least when there's a player that you're probably not going to get an above market deal. And so I think Justin Fields would be a good candidate here as a player I would be more likely to hold right now than to sell, because I think he has a really good chance. I lean towards him having a really good chance to start games sooner than later for the Steelers. I don't think that they are impressed with what they've gotten out of Russ. I don't think that he is long for that team. I don't think he's good anymore, and they don't have the offensive infrastructure around him for him to really succeed. So I think we're going to see Justin Fields play, and when he plays, you know that you can start him as a QB1. So I like the idea of acquiring him, sure, if you can, but at the very least, where you have him, probably holding on to him, waiting for him to get his shot, and then if he does have a couple of good games, that's when I would be looking to move off of him, because I don't really believe in his talent as a long-term guy, but I do think if he does string together a couple of good fantasy games, you could talk people back into that kind of late first-round price for him, and that could be pretty good for a guy that was really, really cheap to acquire in a lot of spots this offseason. Sorry if you can hear my son crying in the other room, by the way. He's having a moment right now. Yeah, so that would be a whole Justin Fields. And then waivers obviously are kind of volatile right now with the preseason stuff. There are no-name guys that are popping up each and every week where there's a little bit of interest. They trend on Sleeper, right, and everybody picks them up. I don't know how deep all your leagues are. I don't know how many players you roster. I don't know how on the pulse your league mates are. So maybe some of these are off base, but I would make sure that Theo Johnson is rostered. If it's a super shallow league, maybe not, but any kind of normal size Dynasty league, I think Theo Johnson deserves to be on a roster or on a taxi squad. He looks like he has the inside track to be the starting tight end for the Giants. Daniel Bellinger sucks. Like, don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Daniel Bellinger is awful. Maybe he stays in as a run blocking guy and he limits Theo Johnson, but he's not good. So if there's anything there with Theo Johnson, targets are wide open outside of Malik Neighbors. Wandale's going to get some slot work, but Johnson's at least a good athlete. He's interesting. I would roster him. Jordan Whittington, I have mentioned in the Discord. He's probably picked up everywhere. He had a really strong preseason week 2, but just worth reiterating, Whittington seems like a really interesting player right now. Johnny Wilson for the Eagles, I have also expressed love for. He's been in the concussion protocol, though, so he may have been dropped for other guys. If you can scoop up Johnny Wilson still, I think that's a great stash. Malik Washington for the Dolphins. He looks like he has the inside track on the wide receiver 3 job, or if not, maybe they use Braxton Berrios as like the slot guy when Waddle and Hill are out wide or something like that. But Malik Washington seems the most likely to benefit if either of the top 2 guys were to miss time. He was a pretty good prospect production-wise out of Virginia. Just didn't get the draft capital, but in that Dolphins offense, you want pieces of that. So I think Malik Washington's great. And then a guy I'm pretty confident is on a lot of waiver wires would be Sion Vaki, he was a two-way player in college. He played safety and running back I don't remember what school. He was drafted in the 4th round to the Lions, and they drafted him as a running back. They say he's playing running back. That's where he's been getting reps. He looks decent, and he only has to beat out Craig Reynolds for the RB3 job there. I think he has a legit shot to win it, especially because I think he can contribute on special teams. So, if he can be the RB3 in Detroit, that is one injury away from having some legitimate value in a very running back friendly backfield, because we know they like to use 2 guys. They will continue to use 2 guys if one of Gibbs or Montgomery misses time. Gibbs already nursing a hamstring injury, so I feel like it is not hard to envision Vaki suddenly having kind of a fantasy friendly role, and I think he can catch passes too. So I like rostering him as well. So those would be my transactions for now. I mean, like I said, I would like that to be a fixture of the stream pretty much every week. Just it won't always be one of each. Like, it could all be buys, it could be a lot of sells, whatever it might be, whatever the week calls for. But that's a good way to condense information into a manageable thing that I could put up on the screen at least. And once I get this thing sorted out more, I'll have graphics and stuff. But yeah, hopefully those are interesting. If there's anybody else you're curious about, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'm going to jump into talking about the rankings for now, but feel free to chime in. If there's any players you want me to talk about in terms of their ranking, I'm happy to do that. If you have any questions about other players on waivers in your league, I'm happy to do that. Chime in with questions at any time. I'll answer any member questions whenever. This doesn't have to be super structured right now. But I figured I would throw the rankings up here. I know that anybody in the first tier, anyone in the first tier doesn't have access to the rankings. But for this stream, you do. So I'm going to put them up here, and hopefully I do this correctly. Put these on the screen, pull it up over here, and I'm just going to go through here, take a look at the guys that I've moved recently, and just talk through my thought process a little bit. Put a note on Caleb Williams. You might want to shop him. That was just based on my experience with what I was able to get in a trade. I feel like he's one of those players that people just go crazy for, and there's just good odds that if you roster him, there's someone in your league that's willing to make like some outlandish offer for him. And as fun as it would be to just hold him and see where this thing goes, more often than not, you're probably going to be happy taking that overpay for Caleb Williams. So I would just look into it. I'm curious what you could get right now to tier down from Caleb Williams to Drake May. I know that might sound like a scary idea, but I think you could genuinely get 2 firsts in some spots, right? Or a first and an interesting player. And for 2 prospects that I frankly didn't have that far apart initially, that is kind of tempting. So just something to consider. Moving down here, not a lot of movement at the top of the ranks necessarily. I had to take J.J. McCarthy out of this tier and move him down. I moved Xavier Worthy up a little bit, just based on him having a strong preseason, Hollywood Brown having an injury. There's buzz mounting for Xavier Worthy. It's hard for me to move him up much further than this right now, just without knowing what the size of his role is actually going to be. Obviously, he could shoot up past this very quickly. But I still feel like if you were to offer me a base first or any of the players in this tier up here, I would still be swapping out Xavier Worthy. I still feel like these wide receivers are, young. They're young or they're prime players, and they all project to score more points than Worthy, at least as we see it right now. So it's tough. He could flip Rashee Rice early in the season if we see that Worthy is actually the go-to guy. I just like the track record that we already have for these other wide receivers. So that's where he sits for now. I did flip him over Ladd, who I had initially. But we'll see. He could be a rocket ship for sure. McCarthy, I'm still not settled on where I have him here. Maybe I need to move him down further, towards Michael Penix. I just feel like he's in such a good situation, and he's such a young quarterback too. Michael Penix is already 24 years old. Not that he's nearing retirement or anything, but I just think the upside on McCarthy is a guy who's still going to be 22 years old when he comes back next year. there's a lot of potential with him when he comes back to just shoot up the rankings again, and so it feels like he just is a first round pick. Like if you just think of him as being a first round pick, he's not going to score any points this year, but he's going to gain value over the course of the season. And there's not a lot of quarterbacks, at least promising quarterbacks, in next year's class right now. So if you think of like where would people rank McCarthy in next year's class, probably could be middle of the first round. So it's like, do you want a mid first or Kenneth Walker? I kind of want a mid first. So it's hard. I might put him at the bottom of this tier, but I don't think there's anything wrong with paying up this type of value for him, especially on a rebuilder, because I guarantee you by January he's going to be up here somewhere. And that's just how it is. Sometimes we just know how these things are going to play out. I did move up Kenneth Walker 5 spots, just a little bit, on the recent discussion about him getting pass catching work. The new coaches are just raving about Kenneth Walker. They don't want to they say they don't want to take him off the field. They say they want to use him all the time. Coaches say stuff a lot, but it feels okay to move Walker up a bit because I do think his floor is pretty safe. I think he is a good rusher. I think no matter what, he's going to have the role that he has had in the past. I don't think he's in danger of losing his job to Zach Charbonnet. So, I'm willing to bake in a little bit of this untapped upside, right? And that's what that's what the move up is. It's just pricing in a little bit of sneaky upside, where if he's more of a 3-down player, then there's a lot more scoring potential for him. I was considering James Cook over him, or I had James Cook over him before, but it feels like with this talk for Walker, it's a lot easier for Walker to add pass catching than I think it would be for James Cook to add a bunch of goal line touchdowns. So when I'm looking at the absolute ceiling, I do kind of lean a little bit towards Walker, and that's why he gets the nod here. Like I said, interested in Fields. I moved him up. He should have been here the whole time. I just wasn't tuned in enough to how likely he was to play games, and this injury with Russ is definitely making things more interesting. Marquise Brown, moved him down a little bit, just, kind of getting shoved out by these two younger receivers. So I'm just worried when he returns, they might have already kind of figured out how the offense is going to operate, and he's going to be maybe an afterthought a little bit. He's still a good wide receiver, but I don't know. It's hard to put the genie back in the bottle with the young players, so I'm not excited about him. I moved Sam Darnold way up, 60 spots. He wasn't ranked before, so moved him from unranked into the rankings. Obviously, he's right now projected to be the full season starter for the Vikings. If I knew that he wasn't going to get benched, like that was a guarantee, I'd probably move him up even higher. We don't have any reason to think that Sam Darnold is guaranteed a starting job for the full season. If he really, really struggles, they can just go over to Nick Mullins. They could do something else. There's no guarantee here. But for the time that he is starting, with the quality of this offense, he could be, low end, mid QB2 type of scorer. Could have some spike weeks in there where he throws some touchdowns. I think it's fine if you feel like you're in need of a quarterback. Let's say you need a quarterback 3 because Drake May is your QB2 and he's not going to start the season. I just don't think it's a big deal if you want to send Devin Singletary away for Sam Darnold or Zach Charbonnet or something like that. I don't know. I wouldn't do it in every situation, but I think it's reasonable. Yeah, but it's borderline. I mean, it doesn't feel great. It doesn't feel great to do. It's just hard with starting quarterback production can be hard to get. So it's a delicate balance there. I did move Marshawn Lloyd down a little bit. Just the hamstring injury, the vibes are bad. They keep talking up A.J. Dillon like he's going to have a role, and like Marshawn Lloyd's going to be a redshirt player, and he was already an older prospect. So it's like he didn't get a full workload in college. It's getting hard to see the upside if the team that drafted him doesn't even see the upside or doesn't see like a clear role for him right away. So I'm not that bullish on him. I know some people are really into him. Some of my friends over at Fantasy Points are really into him. I'm kind of in the middle. I'm curious on Lloyd, but I'm not going crazy for him right now. Cole Kmet is a move down as well. He's been splitting snaps with Gerald Everett, like 50-50 in the preseason, basically. I'm still not sure that's going to maintain into the season, or at least not long into the season, but it can't be ignored, especially with these other 3 wide receivers already there that he has to contend with. If he can't even get all the tight end snaps, that's just going to be pretty bleak for him. It's like, in a best ball context, you can kind of live with it. Just you'll get the touchdown some weeks, but like if you're going to roll him out every week when he's competing with these 3 guys and rotating snaps with Everett, like you're going to get very, very inconsistent production. Down here, I did move up Jalen McMillan, so I was talking about him as a sell, but I do think that the hype is a good thing. Like I do think he's worth moving up. I'm not selling him, for any of these players that are below him. I'm not selling him for Marvin Mims. I'm not selling him for Rashid Shaheed. But I think for some people, they might value him more up in this group, and that's when I'd be willing to jump ship on McMillan. Also, don't get Khalil Shakir. Like, this isn't a mover for me. This is just a guy that I've always had, like, well below the consensus. I don't get it with Shakir. Like, he just screams part-time player to me. I feel like he's going to be an 11 personnel only guy. I don't think he's going to command that many targets on a per-out basis. He feels like an okay player to roster in a best ball format, but I just don't see myself wanting to start him in a managed league. And now Keon Coleman, he's already kind of shown himself to be an every down player. I don't know how good of an every down player, but they've been letting him run all the routes in preseason. So, part of the Shakir thesis was like, what if Keon Coleman sucks and he doesn't play that much? He's going to play. So I don't see a lot for Shakir. He's a guy I'd be looking to sell just because I feel like he's valued higher than this in most leagues. Troy Franklin is having a reverse Jalen McMillan. So he's down, buried on the depth chart. I don't even know if this is low enough for him. Honestly, as a 4th round pick, maybe he should be lower. It could be over before it begins for Troy Franklin. Like, the prospect profile was nice with the production, but he falls to day 3. There's concerns about his size and whether he can actually play outside in the NFL. The Broncos certainly don't think so. So I don't know. I don't know how much hope we should really be holding out for Troy Franklin. But for now, I've moved him down a good bit. I had him at the top of this tier. He's going to just keep moving down unless he can show us something. But him and then Jahan Dotson, like Khalil Shakir, just a clear sell for me. Player that seems to carry some value in certain leagues where people are like real truthers on the talent. He had a really bad season last year, like under 1 yard per out run, I believe, that's like a level of bad you just don't come back from. And Dan Quinn, coach of the Commanders, had some pretty negative comments where he basically said like they only have 1 wide receiver right now, and that's Terry McLaurin. And so it's like, so Jahan Dotson's being lumped in with Olamide Zaccheaus and De'Ami Brown and everybody else as like not stepping up in the wide receiver room. So I kind of think it's over for him, and I just do not have any interest in going down with that ship. So he's a clear sell for me. Like, I'll take a couple of thirds for him. I just don't think Dotson's going to be that guy for you. And then a couple other guys moving down. There's no negative news on Ja'Tavion Sanders. I just literally had him way too high, and I'm not sure why I had him so high because I wasn't drafting him ahead of any of these other rookies. Like, I wasn't taking him over Will Shipley. I wasn't taking him over Braylon Allen. So I don't know why he was that high. I just kind of noticed him there, and I was like, oh, well, he's not good probably. I think he's splitting snaps with Tommy Tremble and Ian Thomas. So things aren't looking good for Sanders. I don't think he'll find himself on these rankings for that much longer unless I expand them a little bit. And Quentin Johnson, same thing. Hanging on by a thread. Very close to just being off the rankings entirely. But for now, he remains at number 200. he just doesn't seem like a guy that's in the Chargers' plans. They're talking about like trying to scheme him usage. That is never what you want to hear about your first-round wide receiver in their second season, that you have to like try to scheme up touches for him, and even that doesn't seem to be working. So I think he's just a classic bust, like just doesn't have it. And you know, when these guys face plant, right, when they come out and they lose a bunch of ADP from year 1 to year 2, it just almost never works out. So I was never holding out much hope for QJ, but to not even be able to carve out a starting role when the other wide receivers are Josh Palmer and DJ Chark and Brendan Rice is just incredibly bleak. I think I need to move Brendan Rice ahead of Quentin Johnston in the rankings, because he actually might be a starter for them. He might, especially DJ Chark, just dealing with a hip injury today, so he could actually jump Quentin Johnston like pretty easily. I'm gonna make a note over here somewhere. Put Brendan Rice in the rankings, and also Jordan Whittington probably deserves to be in the top 200. Honestly, like I should just rotate out some of these gross guys that don't deserve to be in here, like. Darnell Mooney really doesn't need to be a top 200 guy. Like I don't think he can play. So anyway, I'll keep working on that. If there are any questions about specific players in the rankings, I'm happy to address that. But that's where I'm sitting right now with the ranks. I'm going to do a full update again after preseason week 3, or at the very least before week 1. So before week 1, I'll do a full update. I will post about that in the Discord at some point. But that's where we're sitting with the rankings. Alright. Got 2 viewers. 2 viewers right now. You guys are the real MVPs. Appreciate you hanging out while I go through all this stuff. Like I said, you know, work in progress. But I want to find a way to deliver value. So if there's anything that I could be doing on these lives that you think would be helpful, whether it's like live team breakdowns, more buy-sell stuff, more questions, whatever it is, like message me on the Discord. We can work it into the show at some point. As far as I'm concerned, this is a member show. Like you guys are calling the shots. So like I said, just let me know what you want. You want me to like juggle some apples or something, like. Whatever, you want me to wear a funny hat? Like I'm all for it. But I do have some questions that you guys sent me earlier that I can go through right here. I was a little more prepared. I put them like up on the screen here, but we'll go through these questions. There were some interesting ones. So one of them was, this is the first question. Wide receiver bias has been all the rage for several years. Do you believe running back values will ever even out with receivers? Why or why not? So, startup value tilting heavily in favor of wide receivers these days. My gut says no, that this is never going to even out. I don't think, because we've had a death. The death of the bell cow running back is very real. We're seeing fewer and fewer and fewer running backs getting that like full 3 down, 80+% snap share type of role. And those were the guys that we were drafting high in startups, because you knew that you were getting that high-end RB1 production every year. Like Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson seem amazing right now, getting that type of a role. But 5 years ago, there were like a bunch of guys getting that type of workload. It wasn't that uncommon. I mean, they're really talented as well and efficient. But you were getting a lot of running backs getting that type of usage. Like you had the 2017 backs when they were in their prime. You were getting like Joe Mixon and Dalvin Cook and Christian McCaffrey, and for a little bit there Leonard Fournette and Kareem Hunt. There were a lot of these guys. Now, it's not so much the case. And so I don't think we're going to see it even out. We could have a couple of good running back classes, like the 2025 class is supposed to be really strong. We'll see what kind of draft capital they get. That's the other problem, is the NFL isn't investing in these running backs. And so like they have all these good prospect profiles, but then they don't become valuable in Dynasty because they go in the 3rd round or they go in the 4th round. So supposed to be a good class. If you get like 2 back-to-back really good running back classes. We get a couple in the first round. We get a handful of second round guys. I think it could move up running backs, so we could see more running backs going in the first 3, 4, 5 rounds. But it's never going to catch up to wide receivers unless the NFL philosophy like totally changes. Even running back targets, like as teams are passing more, but running back targets are coming down. I think every year for the past 6 years, running back targets in total have dropped. And so that's where you get players like Rashad White, who actually can be pretty valuable in fantasy because they're still getting the targets. Like Tyjae Spears still getting the targets. So, even the running backs getting receptions is becoming harder and harder to come by. It'll be interesting to see how the position, progresses. But like right now, it's still on a downward trend. Like I think running backs could get even less valuable over the next couple of years, but we'll see what these classes bring. It could turn around a little bit. So good question. The next one this one's actually super practical. How far into the season should we decide on a direction for the team? I have a couple teams that are low-level competitors, but can go either way based on how the season starts. I like this question. This is pretty key actually to handling teams that are like, you could rebuild, you could contend, and it is league dependent, so I can't give like a blanket answer on this. It's league dependent. If you already have 1 or 2 teams in your league that are aggressively tanking, like doing it the right way, like selling off all their players so that they have zeros in their lineup, you really can't wait to tank because you want to get as close to that 101 as possible. It doesn't have to be 101 or bust. Like you can still tank and get the 102 or the 103, but you really ideally want to be in the driver's seat for the 101. So if there's multiple teams that are already trying to tank, you kind of need to decide before the season, or at least within the first couple of weeks, and you need to be ready to go. Like you can't mess around. You can't half-heartedly tank but not sell off all the pieces. You're going to end up getting like the 4th or the 5th pick if you do that. So don't wait around in that situation. If you're in a league where everybody's willing to slow play it or everybody wants to contend, you can just sort of go into the season and see what happens. Like if you win, you get lucky, you start 3-0, maybe you push a little bit of value towards this season because you're already a large portion of the way to a playoff berth, right? But if you come out and you start 0-3, maybe it's time to pull the plug. You can even wait till week 5, 6, or 7 in some leagues. Like I've done that. If you have teams that are sort of bad but not tanking, like there's teams in your league that are like they suck, they always lose, but your league is not determining draft order by record. If it's determining draft order by max points, which I think is the right way to do it, you can catch up on max points. Like if you just go scorched earth, you get everybody off your team, right? Like you're literally starting guys that don't play because you have no players, and you're not trying to squeeze every drop of value. You're not holding on to guys that you want to build around. You can tank in week 6, week 7. You can still get the 101. So play it by ear with your league. Pay attention to what other managers are doing. See who's going to be proactive at tanking and who's just sort of passively bad. Because teams that are passively bad, they still start players every week to score points. So you can beat those players. You can make up ground on them in the points race very quickly. All right. I've got one more question here, and then we're sort of into the unscripted portion. So we'll see. Might wrap up a little early today. What is your waiver process in Dynasty? Preseason seems like a lot of things shifting that may not be significant. Yeah, I mean, a ton. Most of the stuff that's happening in the preseason is not going to be significant. Like most of the guys that we are churning on our rosters, that like, oh, this guy played 2 snaps with the starters, or this guy got to sit out of the second half of the preseason game. Like most of those players are not going to matter. Most of the players that matter are the guys that we know matter, the guys that get draft capital, the guys that are already starters. But some of them will probably matter to some degree. And so, the best thing you can do is be active and pay attention. For me, that's a work in progress. Like if there's one part of my Dynasty game that struggles, it is the waiver wire at times because I'm in 22 leagues. I have a 1-year-old son. I have another job in addition to doing the YouTube channel. Like, I'm busy. Everybody's busy. But I'm busy and I'm bad at paying attention to the waivers sometimes. Genuinely, the trending tab on Sleeper can be super clutch for catching up quickly. You know, sometimes if a player's already on that tab, maybe you've missed the boat. But if you're doing like weekly waivers right now in the off season, or even like every couple of days or something, you can go and check that tab and you'll see which players are being added in lots of leagues. That's a quick way to catch up, you know, if you're not sure what's going on. But during the preseason, I've been keeping an eye on the snap counts and the write-ups that Nathan Yankee does. I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name. It's Jahnke. He makes these charts of like which players played snaps with the starters, who sat out, and he writes up his takeaways on PFF. The write-ups might be paywalled, but he posts a lot of the snap count stuff on his Twitter, and that can be interesting, right? When you see players getting snaps that you don't necessarily expect, players that you thought were deeper on the depth chart, like Johnny Wilson, you know, was getting those early snaps. That was a good indicator for him. So those players can be good to pick up. And another thing that's helpful is just being willing to drop players on your team that need to be dropped. Roster cloggers, even rookies in this class that you were more excited about that no longer seem to be relevant. Like, a perfect example, like a month ago, I picked up Tanner McLaughlin everywhere, who is just he's this tight end that the Bengals drafted. They drafted 2 tight ends. They drafted Eric All, and then they drafted Tanner McLaughlin in like the 5th or the 6th round. And I heard somewhere on a podcast, someone was hyping up this guy, like, oh, he's a good prospect, like he might be better than Eric All, he could be the starter. The Bengals don't have much at tight end. They have Mike Gesicki, who got like no guaranteed money. I was like, okay, I'll pick up Tanner McLaughlin. I added him in a bunch of leagues. He hasn't gotten any buzz. There's no indication that he, in fact, has a role with the team. Like, they're still using like Drew Sample or Tanner Hudson or whoever. So I dropped him in a bunch of leagues. I dropped him to pick up other players, and that's fine. Like, he was just sort of a flavor of the week. Didn't lead to anything. I dropped him. I picked up Jalen Brooks in a bunch of leagues because Jalen Brooks is he's a wide receiver on the Cowboys. When I wasn't sure if Jalen Tolbert was the wide receiver 3 or not, this guy was getting some buzz in practice. He was making plays. Like, maybe he's the wide receiver 3 for the Cowboys. Maybe he's a guy where you can flip him for a 4th round pick like immediately if anything happens. But nothing really happened. Jalen Tolbert improved, and he seems like the wide receiver 3. So again, back to the waiver wire for him. So just being fluid, being willing to drop players that you previously were interested in, that's big. And then roster clogging wide receivers too, like older players that you're never actually going to start. Let me pull up the ADP here and just give an example of one of those types of players. Okay. So for example, like DJ Chark or Tyler Boyd, honestly Elijah Moore at this point in his career. These are wide receivers that like you're just never gonna play. If you are, like, you can get this on waivers, like they're going to average 9 points per game or whatever, and they're totally useless. Demarcus Robinson doesn't need to be rostered. Zay Jones doesn't need to be rostered. But these are players that have ADPs. Like, people do draft these guys and put them on their bench. You don't need them on your bench. You want running backs on your bench, or at the very least, you want these rookie wide receiver prospects like a Malik Washington, a Jacob Cowing, Brendan Rice, who can grow into roles. Not guys that we know suck, or guys that we know are very, very, very average and are never going to consolidate the type of volume you want to see, to actually play that wide receiver. So be willing to drop those guys. And then tight ends. Like, people hoard so many tight ends on their bench. You do not need to roster Mike Gesicki or Jelani Woods or Dawson Knox. None of those guys need to be on your team. So yeah, I mean, freeing up those spots where you can bring in actual players that have the potential to gain value, players that probably won't gain any value, but at least could, that can pay off. Ask the people that picked up Puka Nacua last year or picked up Kyron Williams. It can make a difference. So that would be one more tip, I would say, for managing waivers. let's see if there's any other questions people drop. Not yet. Yeah, so that's everything in terms of the questions that were asked. Those are the transactions. Those are the rankings updates. So, for right now, I don't have much. Once the season starts, I can riff for an hour, no problem, even if I have to. But yeah, so we'll wrap this up here. I do appreciate you guys that stopped by. Hunter and T Hum, thank you for coming in and following along. Anybody watching the replay, appreciate you as well. The membership thing is huge for me. Like, it is, seriously, it is a big deal for me being able to do this long term, and I love doing this. But it does take a lot of time to make the videos, and so it means a lot that you guys are supporting the work here, because I know that there are other ways that you can get this stuff. Like, you don't need to be subscribed to me. So I appreciate it. I hope you guys have a good night. Hope you enjoy preseason week 3. And I will be back with another stream next Tuesday for sure. And hopefully another video before that as well. All right? So take it easy. This has been Pure Potential, and I'll talk to you next time.